We are gathered here at the City of Castle Hills for the City Council regular meeting to determine if a quorum is present. A quorum is present. With that said, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. The invocation this evening is going to be by Mr. Michael Pinkston. He is the Christian School of Castle Hills leader. Mr. Pinkston.
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for this great assembly of citizens who've gathered here tonight, and the city staff who've worked so hard to prepare for this meeting and who take care of us on a daily and weekly basis, and for this brand new slate of elected councilmen and women who are here to serve and just to give their time. I thank you for that. And speaking of their time, I just pray that you would for all they give and the time that they invest at no compensation, often thanklessly across the community at times, that you would give that time back to them and their families. Just pray for their spouses and just be with them in a special way during their term and their tenure here, and that they would do some great good here. God, we're thankful to live in Castle Hills, one of the best small towns in South Texas, maybe the galaxy. And just thanking you again for the staff, from the people who take care of our trash and code enforcement, Chief Simons and the force, and Chief Davis and the department that they just serve, and sometimes at risk to themselves. And then, Lord, just Ryan and Janet and all the other folks around the offices here, just bless them all real good. God, in closing tonight, I just pray that this council would have wisdom to know what they need to know, justice to do what they need to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, to have courage to do hard things, and even to take on old and even new challenges here. Just give them a vision for our city, and just guide their hearts, and just give this council the ability to make Castle Hills a better place, a more caring community, leaving this city at the end of their time, God, with just better than they found it. And just I just pray the blessing and the favor of the Lord, peace in this room tonight, and just bless them all real good. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Pinkston. Okay, next we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Cheney is involved in the leadership over at the Alamo Council of Boy Scouts. And I believe we have a gentleman. Hi, Jay. Good to see you here. And he has his son will lead the Pledge of Allegiance. Sir?
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Yes. Sure. Dover, can you turn up the volume as much as it takes, please, in order for people to hear? Again, welcome. Glad to see everybody here tonight. We have an acknowledgement and a presentation tonight, recognition of Sharon Parker's promotion to Chief Dispatcher.
Good evening, council, staff, citizens, and visitors alike. With great honor, we want to recognize and introduce to you our new Chief Dispatcher, Shannon Parker. She was hired back in 11/11, and she was promoted to Chief Dispatcher May 31st after a competitive process. She holds an associate's from San Antonio College and a bachelor's from Sam Houston State University. She, at one point, was a master's electrician for the San Antonio College Theater. And she is the author of our next reporter article, and it is a good one. We're very pleased to have her here, and she's going to take dispatch to new heights. I hope you enjoy the article when it comes out. Shannon, if you'll join me, please.
Shannon, welcome aboard.
Thank you, sir.
I wish you well in your new activities,
Thank you.
continuing activities. And hope you don't get too many calls.
Also, Shannon was very critical during the Wedgwood incident. I believe you were the primary dispatcher on, is that correct, in the morning? Shannon and Val both were, and they did a fantastic job that day in a very tragic time. Thank you.
Chief, I would like to invite you now to present the Officer of the Year, please.
Again, with pride and honor and privilege, I would like to introduce you to our Officer of the Year, Corporal Tony Crawford. He was hired June 2015 and promoted to corporal just in January of this year. He acts as our school safety liaison, which is extremely important to us and those that have students here in our schools and the administrations there. He was also this year nominated for the MAD Outstanding Service Award for his efforts in DWI enforcement. And he holds a bachelor in business from Texas Tech. Guns up, I suppose. Something I'm supposed to say, Tony? And he is currently assigned as one of the B shift supervisors. Was recently recognized at a regional luncheon hosted by ACES Security International. And we're very pleased to have him. He's a great asset, and if you've had the pleasure of meeting him, you know this already. Tony?
Tony, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for, you and I have been through a couple of things together. And he also retrieved some stolen city property that was stolen out of my car. And stolen city property that was also stolen out of my car. And with that said, I'd like to present this to you on behalf of the City of Castle Hills and also the San Antonio Chamber of ASIS International. Congratulations in your... Okay, that's perfect, Dover, thank you. All right, let's move on to citizens to be heard. This will be on non-agenda items, and to remind the public will not be responding during this, the council will not be responding during this period of time, but it can be passed off to the city manager or the appropriate department head. So with that said, the first one on the list is John Meyer.
My name is John Marr. I'm at 205 North Crest. I don't know, can everybody hear me? Okay, before my time starts, I would like to, someone here is an attorney, city attorney. If my discourse will have some alliterative speech in it, if you need to look up alliterative, it is not offensive, it's not abusive, it is descriptive speech. That's all. The reason I say that is because when our Drew Carey lookalike over there decided that the price is not right in this city and that I don't want to be mayor anymore, that was Tim's chance to sit in that chair. And when that happened, I thought, wow, this is really cool. Opie is going to be the mayor of Mayberry. Here's somebody that grew up in this city, and now he's going to be in charge of the city. And then you came in charge of the city. I just got this at my house, as I'm sure many people did in the city, because someone is outraged, absolutely outraged that someone might be fired. It seems a bit selective outrage to me. I didn't see that kind of outrage when Diane File got bounced out on her ass. That happened pretty quickly right here, and I didn't see any selective outrage then. I didn't see any selective outrage when Douglas Gregory was held in contempt here for nothing. I live on North Crest, the very first street that was ever done by the Streets Committee here. His street is much worse than mine. But of course, the engineering studies were so perfect that, well, gee, why was mine done first? All he did was ask that, well, gee, maybe you ought to put my street higher on the list, and all of a sudden, we have a criminal investigation against him, launched by the Menza candidate that used to sit on that side of the council over there. That same candidate that sat on that council over there, who got the police endorsement and the mayor's endorsement, sent out this little caveat to all of us, which says, long story short, and I have it here, why don't we turn all of our neighbors in? If you see anybody saying anything about me, let me know so I can tell my council and have an affidavit made. Let's all squeal on each other. Anybody ever hear of Nazi Germany here? How can you countenance this kind of stuff? As far as my last statement, facts are always being pushed around here. Every side says we have the facts, the other side doesn't. Everybody talks about fiscal responsibility. 6 people were hired maybe a year and a half ago. One person suggested, why did we need those people? That's all that was made, a suggestion. Why did we need these people? The mayor's Barney Fife, that used to sit over there, just had a hissy fit and said, here's all of these reasons why these people are here, and they work in this department, and they work in that department, and this person does this, and this person reports to that person, and that's the facts. But the question was never answered. How are we all better off for those 6 people being here? Are the lines shorter for permits now than they used to be? How are things any better? Fiscal responsibility is always mentioned. We got a dune buggy sitting outside there. Are we all feeling safer because that's sitting there? Is there somebody sitting around a coffee table somewhere in another part of San Antonio saying, you know, our next targets we're going to hit, let's get Alamo Heights and Windcrest, that's a good one. And let's go to Castle Hill. Oh, wait, whoa. They got a dune buggy. We can't go there. An election was just held. New people are sitting on the council. Give these people some time to do whatever they do. Trust me, there are no Russians up here. There's no collusion going on. Let things happen the way they are. And the snowflakes, stop with this alarmist
Myers.
stuff.
Your time's up, sir.
I'm done.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving along. Andy Ronan. I'm sorry. You'll be able to switch when we get into it, Andy. Thank you. I'll make a note by your. Bruce Smiley Califf.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I address you this evening not only as a citizen, but as our city's former mayor. While I'll applaud any candidate's ability to get elected, in this particular case of the newly elected council members, I'm once again, as I was 4 years ago, concerned about their desire and ability to govern legally and effectively. As demonstrated by the first meeting of this group, as well as the current meeting agenda, I am deeply concerned. The lack of adherence to procedure and legal form that has been established by ordinance and in compliance with state law is troubling. The disregard of these ordinances and laws appear to demonstrate a gross ignorance of duties and careless disregard for the welfare of our citizens. I would ask the mayor moving forward to conduct council meetings to strictly adhere to the adopted rules of order of our city as ordained and have been codified, and compel the council to conduct themselves accordingly. I would implore the newly elected and re-elected officials to immediately re-examine your motives and goals to lead respectfully as elected and not to engage in a pattern of reckless, legally questionable conduct, giving our city council the possible appearance to others as a senile geriatric playground. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, next on the list is Mike Flynn.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you for this opportunity to be heard. I am Dr. Mike Flynn. I live at 111 Emerson Lane. In opening, I would like to congratulate our newly elected and re-elected council members for their victory. Given the vitriol that passes for public discourse in this community, I'm amazed that anyone would be willing to serve in an elected position. I have concluded there are primarily two reasons why anyone would be willing to do so. Either they feel a sincere civic responsibility to serve their community, or else they want the power to control the council agenda and the future of the city. Though there has only been one meeting of our new council, it appears that our newly elected council members fell into the latter category when they used political maneuvers to shut down any discussion concerning the French school zoning application. This is unfortunate because an overarching discussion was needed on the zoning application process. Recent zoning applications have put the Zoning Commission in the position of debating changes on zoning ordinances, which I believe is beyond its purview. By putting down any discussion on the French school application, the council missed an opportunity to provide guidance and possibly resolve the problem, and prevented the Zoning Commission from actually performing its duties. That was the reason why a joint meeting was held with the City Council and the Zoning Commission present, was to resolve these issues. Councilman Gregory's concern that the Zoning Commission might be intimidated by the presence of City Council is a blatantly transparent red herring. In making that statement, Mr. Gregory obviously overestimates the power and influence that Council holds over members of the community. Zoning Commission members are unpaid volunteers. If we disagree with City Council, what recourse does Council have? Remove us? Oh wait, you're already trying to do that in my case, but more on that later. Additional evidence demonstrating the efforts of certain council members to try and control the activities of the city is provided in tonight's agenda resolutions. Considering my conclusion that the newly elected council members are motivated by a desire to control the council agenda, I am curious to see what will become of the program to have our roads repaved. The current approach was based on an engineering technical analysis to prioritize road paving on a worst-first basis. It was an objective report in that, regardless of methodology and its perceived flaws, the results were free from any influence by members of the council. At least it was until Councilman Gregory pushed for changes so that his block would receive a higher priority. which ultimately led to his censure. During her previous tenure on council, Ms. Winger was opposed to the approach, but offered no viable alternatives, or was unable to effectively articulate any alternatives. So now we wait to see how the process unfolds. Will council make additional changes to the paving priorities to benefit themselves or favorite constituents? Will council commission still another engineering study? Or will the remainder of our streets go unpaved for another 30 years? The victory of the newly elected council members is impressive, seeing that none of you bothered to show up to the
Mike, hang on just a second. Is there anybody signed up that'd like to relinquish their time to Mike? I'm sorry, ma'am. Jill Moran. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
The victory of the newly elected council members is impressive, seeing that none of you bothered to show up for the Meet the Candidates gathering to discuss your positions. Now that we have seen your resolutions, we know why. The victory is all the more impressive given the history of some of the elected members that includes censure and being sued for libel. If it is true that we are known by the company we keep, then it's not looking too good for you, Mr. McCormick. In closing, I would like to caution all members of the council that the citizens of Castle Hills are watching and are not unwilling to speak up for approaches that benefit the city and are against a self-promoting agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next on the list is Carolyn Sanders Staffel.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council people, audience. I am Caroline Sanders, and I am speaking this evening for Dr. Edward Staffel, who lives at 104 Sheffield Place. He is at a business meeting, a medical meeting, and unable to attend. Thank you for your indulgence. As a longtime resident of Castle Hills, I wish, can you not hear?
I can, but some can't, so go ahead.
Is that better? All right. As a longtime resident of Castle Hills, I wish to endorse the city's employment of a very capable city manager, a gentleman with his experience and expertise as well as his education is required, in my opinion, to properly negotiate the very complicated regulatory hurdles imposed by the state and federal bureaucracy of the 21st century America. The city's vote to purchase a new computer software system to more professionally manage and conserve our city's financial resources was another action which I wholeheartedly endorse. Budget management is critical so that the residents of Castle Hills can be assured that the city government is conserving our tax dollars and utilizing our funds in the most prudent way to keep our special city well maintained so it may continue to be a desirable area in which to live and rear a family. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Staffel. Okay. Mr. Frank Paul.
Guess this got to come up a little bit here. Can you hear me now? All right, how's that? First of all, I'd like to just make a comment about what the first speaker said. Number one, first of all, before I do that, I did not vote for censure, but it was not a criminal investigation. It was an administrative inquiry. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm disappointed in this agenda item that we have items that are here tonight for more reasons than one. The other thing I'm disappointed in, I don't see anything on here that will protect our city from the so-called impound lot. During the election, Ms. Winger and Mr. Gregory, again, make sure that they can hear me. Everybody hear me all right? Good or bad? Okay. Ms. Winger and Mr. Gregory kept pushing the narrative that council, except him, of course, wanted to put an impound lot in a residential area, or our city Of course, this was not the case, but Ms. Winger elected to continue the narrative. Sorry about that. I have this because there's a couple of quick things I wanted to read here. It even continued on election day. Now, I don't know if our new self-appointed, proclaimed independent councilperson, Mr. McCormick, said anything pro or con, but I do know that from the tent that his helpers and other helpers from there were in fact telling people coming in that, oh, those people are going to do an impound lot. But the reason I said is I know one of them had a green shirt on. Sorry, Skip, but they did. Excuse me, Councilman. Now I'd like to read just two short things here. Number one, August 27th last year, the agenda item was to discuss the concept, not put in, the concept of an impound lot. Council had held an insightful discussion that promoted additional questions on the project. Therefore, they suggested future discussion on the project. There was a motion called, and it was to accept for a concept, and it passed unanimously. Mr. Gregory, myself, and the other people, because we weren't talking about plans, we were talking about concept. So that's number one. So now let's fast forward to September. September 12.
Mr. Paul, will you give me a moment?
Sure.
Your time is up. Is there anybody who would like to relinquish their time to Mr. Paul? Patsy? Okay. All right, Mr. Paul, go ahead.
Okay. Let me get September 12th here. So, well, that just went off, didn't it? Okay, September 12th, last year, in the council meeting. There was a motion made by Councilman Gregory, seconded by myself, and what the motion was to accept the budget, the 2018 budget, less any funds for an impound lot. I'm sure you remember that. It passed unanimously. So this rhetoric about an impound lot was nothing but, quite frankly, a bunch of lies. And, you know, elections are elections, but lies are lies. There's one more thing that I wanted to mention here. In Mr. Gregory's handout that he passed around for his campaign, he wrote on here, council proposed placing an auto impound lot in a residential area. Now, you know that that was a lie. And in fact, you sat up here and you did your best to get everybody to go look at the property behind Flocks. And if I remember correctly, that's a residential neighborhood. So all this rhetoric and all this bad stuff about everybody here that was on here, there was no impound lot, there is no impound lot, and it was just a lie by two of our city council people. By the way, Mr. Gregory seems to have a habit in elections of writing letters that are lies. I just read one from last election. He wrote one in 2016 that called his opponent, accused him of raw political corruption. Cost him thousands of dollars to settle that. He had to write a letter to let the people know. I haven't seen it yet. And the interesting thing about that, now that the campaign's over, I didn't say anything about this during the campaign because I didn't think it was proper at the time, but I don't mind saying it now. The city spent thousands of dollars on an attorney because we had to have some of our employees deposed as a result of that false statement and the resulting lawsuit. I asked the mayor, I asked the city manager to consider, let's send in Mr. Gregory a bill That's not a council item. That is just a pure item that needs to be taken care of from a city standpoint. Lastly, the question is, one more item.
Mr. Paul?
Yeah.
Your time is up under Patsy. Is there anyone else who would like to relinquish their time to Mr. Paul? Mr. Paul, your time is up.
Okay, that's fine. So where are we going? We want honesty, we want integrity, and we want openness that I haven't seen through two candidates. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Okay, moving right along, we're going to go on to Diane McNamara, please. Mr. Paul, did you have anything else to say? Ms. McNamara has given her time to you, sir. Okay.
You know, this really isn't fun for me to do this, but we need to start this off properly. And when you have lies and you have all that, just to get elected in a small city, you've got to be kidding me. But you've proven where you are and what you do. And it just, it blows my mind. One more item, the Texas Code of Fair Campaign Practices. It's not mandatory, it's not must be, but it's recommended all candidates sign this to show their intent to be fair and proper in campaigning. We had 6 candidates. 5 candidates signed it. Mr. Gregory signed it on April the 23rd, which was the start of early voting. So his campaign material with the lies have already been passed out. I think that's disgraceful. So where am I going with all this? It's real simple, like I said. Honesty, integrity, and openness. This is what the citizens want and they deserve. Not everyone agreed with my decisions. I understand that when I was on council. That's the way you're going to do. But they can't question whether or not I thought I was doing what was best for the city. And by that, honesty, my integrity through the lies that were presented was questioned. And I guess that's enough right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Okay, we're moving along here. Robbie Casey.
Hello, Mayor and Councilman and ladies. I'm Robbie Casey. I live at 144 Cass Hills Drive. I'm not here to call any names, but I would like to see us as citizens of Castle Hills become adult, respectable people, and especially our aldermen and alderwomen. And obviously, we have a collusion here between 3, or we have a team. I won't call the name, but when I moved here in 2001, I was proud to be a citizen of Castle Hills, and I could go back to anyone and say, I live in Castle Hills and we have great people there and they all get along. Well, I can't say that now. It's an embarrassment to have the TV stations look at us and think of us as a Republican and a Democratic election, and that's what it looks like. I just definitely think that it's wrong to come in the second council meeting wanting to clear the slate and put in your little Twinkies or whatever you want to call them so that you have control. I think you should give the employees of Castle Hills a chance to prove to you that they can do a better job than you're doing now. Thank you.
Thank you, Robbie. Okay. Iris Brayman. Okay. John Squire.
Everybody hear me okay? Thank you, Mayor, Council. John Squire, 208 Chaddington Court. Leslie Winger, you are a liar. Just to make sure you understand, you are a liar. You maliciously attacked and lied, making false and salacious statements, accusations about me at the January 28th City Council meeting. Furthermore, I believe that you will lie about or trash anybody for your political and personal gain. At this point, I guess I need to remind you of your actions at the recent joint city council meeting where you disenfranchised the residents of our city by not allowing the public hearing to take place or even any citizen to voice their approval or concerns. I believe, in my opinion, this is the basic right of people, and your abuse of this right, in my opinion, is criminal, and at the very least, disgusting behavior and not fitting of an elected official. Leslie, you are drunk on power and you're out of control. Furthermore, Leslie, I need to share that I'm embarrassed that I actually helped you and your husband, Bob Anderson, when he had to go to court because of the criminal charges that were filed against him. But we all make mistakes. Leslie, even though you are a liar, I do, however, forgive you for what you did to me and my family as God commands me to. Skip, I do remember our conversations and your commitment to be independent. I truly hope that you will be independent in your thinking and your voting, and you'll work for the entire city, not just for a few select residents. Also, if you actually do not vote with Leslie on a serious agenda item, I hope that you're able to hang up the phone when Bob Anderson calls you and start screaming at you like he has done many times before. Remember, Skip, you'll be judged on your actions, not what hot air comes out of your mouth. We already have too much of a blowhard sitting up there on council. Skip, I hope you did not lie to me. Douglas, this is from a letter from our auditors, Armstrong, Vaughn & Associates, dated April 30th, 2018. Public Funds Investment Act. As part of our audit, we reviewed the city's compliance and with the Public Funds Investment Act, we found as a result of our test that the city does not have an approved investment policy for 2017. Additionally, we noted that the investment officer is not signing off on quarterly investments reports. Our procedure determined that the city is not in compliance with the provisions of the Texas Government Code, Chapter 2256.008 of the Public Investment Funds Act. Douglas, why have you been derelict in your duties? For all of council, one short statement. In appointing members to the various committees, it's time to utilize subject matter experts and stop the favoritism and political cronyism. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next up is Miss Jana Baker.
My name is Jana Baker. I'm at 213 Hibiscus. My comments concern the Joint Council and Zoning meeting. It was an unusual meeting, but I'm speaking because I've had a number of people come up and ask me what happened and why citizens weren't allowed to be heard. What people need to understand is that the mayor controls the protocol and the process of all council meetings. The mayor did not call for citizens to be heard. It is improper for anybody to blame council members for the mayor's lack of oversight, his failure to act, and his failure to lead. I'd also like to point out that there appears to be a bias tonight on who gets extra time to speak. Mr. Meyer wasn't granted the opportunity for anybody to give him time to speak, but the other people since then have. Thank you.
Mr. Meyer, would you like to speak again? If someone will give up their time, I didn't know that you asked. Would you like someone to give up their time for Mr. Meyer? Thank you, Jana, for reminding us of that. Next is Candace Baird.
Good evening. I'm Candace Baird. I'm at 106 Prinz. And my comments this evening are regarding our garbage, recycle, and brush pickup that we pay for to have several times a week, except for the brush. We are a city of beautiful homes and friendly people, and we all try our best to keep our homes beautiful. I had a photinia in my yard that was diseased, wasn't coming back. My son came over, we cut it down, put half out in the alley 1 week, was picked up, everything was fine. Put the second half out in the alley the next Wednesday, all limbs, if I can drag them out there, anybody can pick them up. All the limbs had the handles facing towards the rut. They were on my grassy side. I received a note on my front door telling me that I had too many limbs out in the alley. The evening before, I walked both blocks of my street. There wasn't another limb out there. They weren't picked up. Not only were they weren't picked up, an allotted amount wasn't picked up. I don't think it's too much to ask. If we cut our limbs, if we have them stacked properly, pick them up. I was told to haul them back in my yard. I'm almost 70 years old. I'm not going to do that. Come on, guys. Help out a little bit where it's needed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Baird. Mr. Rapley, will you get with Rick and address our program as far as, especially as we're coming into the summer months? And then get back with Ms. Baird, please. Okay. Last one on the list is Gordon. Okay, thank you. Okay, yes, Terry? Did you come in late and didn't get to sign up?
Well, that's a good excuse, Mayor, but I can't say I did that.
Would you sign this sheet, please, sir? Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Terry.
Rick Harada. Every time I've ever worked with Rick and his guys, I can't say anything but thank you. I have nothing but appreciation for everything that his team is doing. And, 124 West Castle Lane, Terry Worth. So, just wanted to, I was kind of spurred at the last moment to share that because my experience is I'm just thankful. And I'm thankful for each one of you guys, folks, doing what you're doing too. And just hope that we're praying for all of y'all and we're praying for ourselves and our attitudes. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Mr. Rapley, make a note of that, please, and make sure that we get with Mr. Worth to find out what we're doing right these days. Thank you. Okay. Let's see, where are we at? Oh. Okay, where's my schedule? Okay, here we go. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And is there anyone who would like to amend the consent agenda, please?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull items A, subsection I, and double I, the minutes, because I have some corrections for them.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory?
I'd like to pull C.
Pull C, okay. Anyone else on council? Yes, sir.
Sorry. Still can't hear me? There we go. Item B, ending April 30th, 2018, appears to have some problems. There are a couple of accounts listed which are no longer in existence. The special funds have no totals of sums budgeted in them, which I believe makes the report incomplete, certainly, and perhaps misleading. And so there's, I don't know about the details, the small items in the report, because I haven't looked at those in that kind of detail, but obviously the report needs to be looked over before
Okay.
we approve it.
Thank you, sir. Okay, let's...
Mr. Mayor?
Yes?
I take back pulling C.
B and C?
No, just B, not C.
Just B, not C. Okay, good. All right.
I have.
Ms. Winger?
Yeah, I'd actually like to table item A, double I, because there's, been a lot of discussion about what actually happened, and I'd like an opportunity to go over the video with the city secretary so that we can get it correct.
Mr. Brennan? There's an item on the table to table in the middle of a deal? In the middle of a consent agenda, and Ms. McLean has also wanted to make some comments on that.
Well, I would think the motion to table takes precedence over anything else on that item.
It does?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There's a motion on to table item A.
Mr. Brennan, or Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Mr. Brennan, to table something means it goes away forever. I believe we're bound to adopt minutes, so I would believe we need to postpone that to another day.
That would be a better motion to postpone for another meeting, next meeting.
Table it till the second June meeting.
So what are we doing? Or are we correctly tabling the item, please? Or postponing it?
It's being postponed, Mayor. If that motion passes, it'll be postponed till the next meeting.
Okay. Can any discussion take place on that item
Yes, sir.
because it is?
Yes, sir.
Ms. McLean, go ahead.
No, not an emotion.
Oh,
Oh, excuse me. We have a motion to postpone it. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Okay, there's a motion and a second to postpone. Ms. Lynn, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, the corrections that I have for that set of minutes, I think may correct some of the problems. Find my notes. I know that one of the items on the final vote, Mrs. Scott abstained from the adjournment, and she's listed as a nay vote on the very last page. Also on the very last page, Mayor Howell's expression of an apology to Mr. Ackley happened after the meeting was adjourned, but while on tape. Councilmember Wanger expressed her objection to having the city attorney as well as the zoning chairman seated at the dais. Those are all the corrections on the last page. On the first page, I do not believe that the ladies representing the French school were listed on the attendance roster. There's a redundant sentence at the end of the paragraph starting Councilmember Gregory requested Mayor Howell's permission. The last sentence should be deleted. In the paragraph above the boxed motion, second by Wanger and McCormick on page 2, where it says members of council held a divided discussion at which time Councilmember Wanger requested a call for a vote. There was no discussion. It should just read Councilmember Wanger requested a call for a vote. And the last change I have for this set of minutes is under the box on page 2. that starts with City Attorney Brennan requested. At the end of it, it was for the Zoning Commission's recommendation of additional language for the applicable ordinance. Those are all my corrections for that set of minutes.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Okay, we're moving on to item B, which was Skip. I think you already explained
Yes,
why you wanted to pull item B. Is that correct?
I may restate that if you'd like.
Of course.
Okay. The funds that are inactive that are showing up in the report are civic participation in Fiesta Castle Hills. There are no budget amounts in any of the special funds, and those are my primary complaints, because those by themselves make the report incomplete and perhaps misleading. I think that's sufficient cause to put it off. I believe there probably are some detail errors in various small amounts, but I haven't had time to look at that, and I think it needs to be looked at before we approve it.
Okay. So you'd like to postpone it till the next meeting, is that correct, sir?
Whatever. Yes, sir. Whenever we can get it finished up, yes.
Okay. Sure. Is that a motion to postpone until the next meeting?
What are we postponing?
We're just doing on individual items, it appears. So you want to go ahead and make a motion?
Double I and II, or?
Well, apparently everyone has a question on the item on the table, so we're doing A, B, and C.
So A, B, and C are all being postponed?
Not yet. Hang on.
Okay, I'll move that. I'll move that we postpone those three items to another issue.
Okay.
Second.
Discussion.
Douglas, you okay with that? Discussion, go ahead.
No, I would like to go through reporting,
We have a
discuss.
second on that point of order? On discussion?
Cheetah. Don't need a point.
They've been moved and seconded.
Okay, good. Go ahead. Thank you, Douglas.
Okay. I would like to go over with the financial person we have, because I have several questions about the quarterly financial report ending in April that I think she could probably answer in less than 15 minutes. And one significant question for the whole thing. So I would like to discuss it tonight. If the rest of the council doesn't want to, we can discuss it next session.
There appears to be an item on the table from, just a postponement from Mr. McCormick. Did I hear you second it, Mr. Winger? Okay, good. So we have a motion on the table to second. If you would like to call for the vote, I guess, and then we'll find out if it fails, and I guess we'll go ahead and discuss it tonight.
What is the motion again, Mr. Mayor?
The motion was to postpone items A, B, and C to the next meeting, as far as what I understood.
I don't need C to be pulled. I don't know if anybody else does.
Okay. You were the only one, but the motion stood with Mr. McCormick, so. So we need to take a vote whether or not that's so, unless, can you add an amendment to that, Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Go ahead, Douglas. You want to add an amendment to the motion on the table to suspend?
I suspend the request of having to discuss item C tonight. I request that it agree in the consent addendum. I remove my request. I remove my motion. I let the
Okay,
motion on the table
thank you,
stand.
sir. We've got a motion on the table from Mr. McCormick to postpone this until we have a chance to look at it on item A, B, and C. And Mr. Winger seconded it. All in favor? All opposed? Douglas, thank you. Okay, 4-1. Thank you very much. All right. Let's move on down the road here. The next item is 3. Consider and act upon a Crime Control Prevention District Board Director recommendation to approve ordinance number 2018.
That's item 2, sir.
You missed 1 and 2.
You're absolutely right. Sorry. I am human. Item number 1, consider and act upon a resolution R 18-06-12-A, appointing a alderman or alderwoman to serve 1 year as Mayor Pro Tem. My recommendation is Amy McLean. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to appoint Leslie Winger as Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay,
Point of order, the mayor has already made a suggestion. He's waiting for a second, sir.
that's correct.
And I second your motion to appoint Amy McLean.
Mayor, you can't make a
I
motion.
can't make a motion. I just suggested that we did. Okay.
My apologies, sir.
Okay, we have a motion on the table by Mr. McCormick to Ms. Leslie Winger as Mayor Pro Tem. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second on the table for Ms. Winger. Okay, discussion, please. I'd like to know why. Douglas, do you have any comments on Ms. Winger?
I've already been Mayor Pro Tem, and I appreciate the mayor asking me to be Mayor Pro Tem this time, but I will defer to whomever the rest of the council picks.
Okay. Anyone else want to make some comments before we go ahead and pull the vote?
Yes, Mr. Gregory doesn't want it. I don't want it. I think Ms. Winger has some more experience than anybody here, and so that's why I recommended her.
That's fantastic. I've been in that position myself. Okay, so with that said, the nomination is for Ms. Winger. There's a motion and a second. All in favor? All opposed? 3-2, motion carries. Congratulations, Ms. Winger, on your appointment. Okay. Moving right on here, we're going to go to item number 2. Consider the acceptance of the city council meeting schedule for the development and adoption of the fiscal year 2019. Mr. Rapley?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Attached in the agenda is the budget calendar that we've proposed as a draft. We have done this in order for council and staff to arrange, obviously, their schedules for the required budget and tax meetings over the next few months. We're going to kick off here internally to meet with staff and the departments for their budget, and then looking in the third week of July to have the first meeting with council. So we wanted to bring this draft budget calendar to y'all's attention and review to see if there's any conflicts with the dates. We've also plugged in 2 alternate dates if we can't get or need other workshop meetings with council to evaluate the proposed budget.
Thank you, Mr. Rapley. Let's go ahead and get a motion on the
Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Okay. Go ahead and make the motion, then we'll ask Mr. Rapley the question. Skip? I understand. Thank you. Motion, please, to move it forward.
I'll move that we accept the proposed calendar.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Any second on that?
Second.
Okay. Ms. McLean, thank you very much. Douglas, go ahead.
Mr. Rapley, it may be just a typographical oversight, but on the 24th of July and the 31st of July, you have no parentheses saying no council action, as you do have on the 8th of August. Was that just a typographical oversight?
No, because again, further down in those meetings, council will be taking action on the proposed budget. These are just workshops for y'all to review and evaluate the proposed budget of the departments.
Okay.
Thank you. Douglas, are you satisfied with the answer to your question, sir? Thank you very much. Okay, so we have let's go into discussion now. We have a motion, we have a second on the table. Let's start on the right. Mr. Douglas, Mr. Gregory, do you have any comments or questions regarding the item on the table?
Still after all these years. Just to alert the council, on the 20th of July, I have jury duty, June, I have jury duty, and it may bleed into one of these dates. So I may or may not be here on one of these dates if I'm called to serve. and serve.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gregory. Ms. Winger, did you have any questions or comments for the item on the table, please?
No, I do not, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Winger. Ms. McGlynn, did you have any questions or items for the item on the table, please?
No, thank you, Ryan, for your work on this.
Thank you, Ms. Scott.
No.
Mr.
No
McCormick.
questions, no questions.
Thank you, sir. Okay, with that said, it looks like that we have got a move forward. I'm looking at the list here on the agenda items, and no one has signed up to talk about this item. So with that said, let's take a vote. All in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you very much, council. We're going to move on to the next item, which is 4.
3, I'm looking.
3. The,
What you started with?
the other 3. Thank you, Leslie. Okay, we'll consider and act upon the Crime Control Prevention District Board of Directors' recommendation to approve ordinance number 2018-0612A, amending the FY 2018 purchase of a police department radio, line item 5008116, radios in an amount not to exceed $110,000, with a $90,000 transfer in from the CCPD Balance Fund. Well, I'd like to hear this one.
Do we need a motion?
Need a motion, please?
I'll move that the council accept the proposed budget from CCPD.
Thank you, Skip.
Second.
Thank you, Leslie. All right, let's move forward. Your presentation, sir?
Yes, sir. I don't know that it'll be much of one, so I hope your expectations aren't too high. But what we're really doing here is just reapproving something council approved years past. It just wasn't allocated, rather, in crime control by current accounting protocols, and really it's more of a formality than anything. I can go into more history if you'd like to about the purpose for the purchase and the necessity for the purchase, but the reason it's on the agenda item is just a reapproval of something we've approved years past when you adopted the crime control budget. It just wasn't identified appropriately to current accounting standards, if you will.
Question?
Yes, sir, Mr. McCormick.
Chief Siemens, let me clarify where the money's coming from. As I understand it, $90,000 comes from the CCPD fund balance, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the other $20,000, is that coming from current deposits from CCPD funds?
That's correct.
So it's not coming out of city funds, it's coming out of CCPD funds, right?
Yes, sir, and to elaborate, again, already allocated funds, they just weren't allocated appropriately according to our current finance officer. Yes, sir, you're accurate.
That came up as a question. I thought it needed to be cleared up.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. I guess we'll go ahead and start this way. Miss, did you have any questions on that, please?
No, that was clarified. They're already allocated funds.
Yes,
Thank you, Ms.
ma'am.
Scott. Ms. McGlynn?
No questions, thanks.
Ms. Winger?
Well, I don't have any questions specifically about this item because I'm sure this is something you've overseen, and I know how careful you are about it. But, you know, you and I have talked about the fact that we have a little problem right now because it's not clear who exactly serves legally on that board.
Point of order.
Yes, ma'am?
We're discussing the purchase of radios and the transfer of money, not the committee.
We're discussing
Not
their
the committee.
budget.
We're not discussing the committee, who is on that committee.
Yes, ma'am. There's a point of order on the table for getting off an agenda item. Anything else, Ms. Winger?
Do you want to rule me out of order?
I am ruling that the fact that there is a point of order because you're getting off the subject matter.
Okay.
Okay? Mr. Gregory, thank you very much.
Thank
Okay, did you have anything else to say?
No, sir, if there's no questions, thank you all.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we have a item on the table to recommend and approve the item. We had a motion and we had a second. With that said, Ms. Fegans, did you have anything to add to this while we're there? Smells good? Good. All right, with that said, all in favor of this item? Mr. McCormick, were you in favor of the item, sir?
I'm in favor, yes.
Yes, sir. Okay, that's unanimous 5. Thank you very much. Okay. The next item is number 4, clarifying the mayor's consider and act upon ordinance number 2018-0612B, clarifying the mayor's authority as manager of city property limited to usage and preservation of assets in emergencies and city council's authority for approval of physical modifications and security procedures. Ms. Winger?
Wait.
I'll move we accept the proposed ordinance.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I object to the question.
Okay.
Mr. Brennan, isn't it your opinion that this proposed ordinance potentially violates state statutes and/or local ordinances, in particular, Section 22.042 of the Local Government Code, which has to do with the stated powers of the mayor?
I believe so.
Okay, so it's the opinion of the attorney that 22.071 is violated under the local law. Government mandates that the city, that the mayor is the governing body over the city. Is that correct? The property of the city?
Governing body, did you say?
I said let's read the ordinance correct. 5-minute break.
Amy, you have a copy of that code you signed?
22.042, I don't
You have
know.
a
Ladies and gentlemen, can we find our seats, please? Thank you very much. What's that? Are we live again? Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, we're looking at item number 22.042. The mayor is the chief executive officer of the municipality. The mayor shall at all times actively ensure that the laws and ordinances of the municipality are properly carried out. The mayor shall perform the duties and exercise the powers prescribed by the governing power of the municipality. The mayor shall inspect and conduct each subordinate municipal officer and shall cause any negligence, carelessness, or other violation of the duty to the prosecuted and punished. The mayor shall give to the governing body any information and shall recommend to the governing body any measure relates to the improving of the finances, police, health, security, cleanliness, comfort, ornament, or good government of the municipality.
Can I ask a question on that one? You said you'd give them information?
Excuse me?
Did you start out by saying you would give the governing body information on that, what you're reading?
That's the ordinance of local government code. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this doesn't conflict with that. Go on.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
it starts out by saying any information and shall recommend to the governing body. Shall is a mandatory word when used in legal writing like statutes. And so you also have the ability to the requirement that you recommend to the governing body any measure that relates to improving the finances, police, health, security, cleanliness, comfort, ornament, or good government of the municipality.
And this ordinance in no way conflicts with that?
So how can I do that if the council is actually the one doing
it's
that?
just, as Ms. McLean just said, it's a recommendation. You can recommend to the governing body.
Mr. Mayor?
Nobody's
Yes.
saying you can't.
It is, in my opinion, this ordinance, the way it is proposed, tries to limit what the state statute allows you to do.
How?
Because the ordinance as proposed limits his ability to control city property to the preservation of assets in emergencies and
that's
gives
not
council
what it says.
authority for approving the physical modifications and security procedures. Well, then maybe it needs to be rewritten to a way that says what you want it to say.
Well, but he hasn't read anything so far that conflicts with the way this is written. There's nothing that prevents the mayor from making a recommendation to the governing body. Nobody's saying that there is.
Douglas?
Not here.
I sat down with Mr. Brennan for a few minutes, trying to understand, and he confirmed with me that this motion is, am I correct, Mike? Tell me if I'm wrong. This motion is basically reiterating what the statute that you're reading says.
That's right.
Well, I still don't understand if
Not necessary.
I have a
under our
question,
current...
Mr. Mayor.
Yes?
Why do we even need this statute then if it's just reiterating what state law already says? If the state law says it, why do we need an ordinance that says it as well? State law covers it. We don't need this ordinance.
That's correct.
Okay, then let's pull this ordinance. We don't need it.
But now we've clarified that it is simply based on information and recommendations, unlike what we heard before.
But
No,
it's
Miss-
superfluous. It's
Mr.
not
Mayor.
needed.
Hang on just a second. Ms. Scott, you have the floor, please.
Yes, it's superfluous. Why are we repeating Texas state law and putting into our ordinance that's already in Texas state law? We do not need to duplicate it.
Well, I
This
think
isn't
the
needed.
answer to that question is section 3.
Point of order, do you have the floor, Mr. Gregory?
You asked the question. It's superfluous.
To Mr.
I would have
Brennan.
agreed with, except for section 3 in this ordinance, which reads mobile metal detectors will continue to be used during court proceedings, but at no other times except upon approval by the city council. So if that section was not there, that would be correct. And therefore, the mayor would have to come before the council on a separate issue to request from the council permission to put mobile metal detectors in other proceedings other than court proceedings. So up until that time, he can't put them in the community room, and he can't put them anywhere.
So I can't protect the citizens of this city from anybody carrying a gun in here and possibly hurting someone, Douglas? Is that what you're saying?
No, what the code.
That's what I heard.
What the code
Not at all.
clearly says.
That's what I heard.
Is that if you want to have something changed from the code, all you have to do is bring it before council.
Well, I understand, and the reason I think you're bringing this up is because we have some security issues that we are already talking about doing. We also have, Johnny, is that correct? We have bids out for actually bulletproofing the dais up here, and we've done that over there as far as the door is concerned, and we're talking about now protecting the citizens as other cities our size have done. So it looks like to me that this could be retaliatory action for you to take over that. And you yourself said to a department head of this city that some things are going to change around here when it comes to security. So I question that. Did that mean that you don't want the security of the, that's all I'm asking. I'm asking.
All you have to do, Mr. Mayor, is bring a proposal to the council in accordance with the code.
Why would I do that when we've already
what the
got the
code
things
requires.
together? No, that's the thing you're proposing is what you're doing. You're trying to hamstring me is what you're
In the code
doing.
in that book
To council.
clearly states what you have to do. You have to bring it to the council. You wanted to do this? Fine, but you have to bring it to the council for a vote. That's what the existing code, the local government of that code from that book says you have to do. That's all you have to do.
It isn't what we had to do because this isn't even funds that are city money. This is funds that were set aside for court, is what they were.
It's not the point.
You're not on the floor, Ms. Winger. Yes.
According to the state ordinance, it simply says that the mayor shall give the governing body, that's our entire governing body, including our city manager, shall recommend to the governing body. The entire governing body is anyone who works for the government. Yes, our governing body is not just council. Mr. Brennan, is the governing body just council? Is our governing council?
You're not on the floor, Douglas. You're out of order.
Or is our governing body all of our municipal officers that work here for the city?
I think in this
Pardon, would you
context, the governing body is the city council. I think that's what it's intended to say.
Okay.
Can we clarify this a little bit?
Sure.
Please?
We'd be glad to, Skip.
The issue that has come up, sir, is that there are folks who object to what appears to be an executive fiat without the participation of the council. I don't think that's really too much to expect. The powers of the mayor described here, he says, shall perform the duties and exercise powers prescribed by the governing body, that's the council. And the mayor should make recommendations on whatever he thinks is important to the council. And the council is supposed to act on it. The objection is that the order being given directly without the participation of the council. I think it's clear that you should recommend whatever you think is important to the council. But the important thing is that the council is the governing body and the mayor doesn't exercise supreme authority without going through the council. Now, between those two things, there's nothing that prevents you from making a recommendation. That's, I think, what is sought to be done here, is that you make a recommendation to the council, and the council should act on it. And that something might have happened without the recommendation or without the council's participation, I think is the thing that's objected to.
Mr. McCormick, that makes perfect sense. And if that was the intention, I would applaud and I would wave the flag. But when you have
Get it for you.
thank you. But when you have a sitting member of council say to a department head that that will never happen in this city, and that we're going to see that it doesn't, I believe was the exact statement that was made by a sitting council member. To me, what that implies is you're trying to hamstring the situation where a certain group on council, and I'm not saying who, it could be Moretta, it could be Amy, it could be Leslie, is trying to say that they want to control this, especially when that certain group is pointed out. Go ahead.
No, I think I'm done. I think.
Okay, me too.
Are we ready to?
I want to go on record saying that my intention of this is to make sure that the city of Castle Hills residents are safe. Within 5 miles of this building, we had an incident with a gun, which anyone who has a CHL can carry into this room. Anyone. We just want to know where they are. That's all. I'll be right with you. So with that said, it happened within 5-7 miles of this building, where immediately the next day a small city enacted their metal detectors, and we started acting like the rest of America did. It's the times we live in. I don't think anybody in Castle Hills would do something like that. But the gentleman that walked into a nearby city was a resident of that city, but not an active member of council that normally comes to a meeting. That is all I am concerned with, is making sure the residents are safe, and also you don't have the floor, Ms. Winger.
No, but I'd like to.
You don't have the floor, Ms. Winger. You are out of order. And that we act in a responsible way. That's it. And this has already come before a previous council. This is already enacted. This is already in the middle of getting bids. This is already ready to go, with the exception of one bid that Johnny has to get as far as electricity is concerned. So why hamstring the safety of our city? That's all I got to say. Ms. Winger, you had, yes?
Mr. Brennan, I would like to respectfully ask you to review Local Government Code Section 200.003, subsection 6, which pertains the governing body is the court, council, board, commissions, and other bodies established or authorized by law to govern the operations of the local government. It says that the governing body establishes a records of management program for the whole government, including all the offices and divisions that carry out the various functions of government. There is a one-to-one relationship between the governing body, and there's governing bodies outside of your organizational structure determining that sort of thing. So if we could please review that section 200.003, subsection 6. I do think it includes more than city council, it's my opinion, as part of our governing body. So to take that away from the mayor and give it only to council, I do believe is in violation of the state statute.
Thank you. Ms. Winger?
Again, you know, there has not been a time when this matter that you're now discussing has come before council for a vote. So all we're saying is clarification.
We are saying?
Well, Skip and I have our names on this.
Oh, okay, I just want to make
Is that
sure
okay with
we
you?
were.
Well, that's
okay.
what I'm talking about.
Good,
Okay.
all right.
Is that if you want to do this, you have to bring it before council for a vote. That's all. Okay? That's a clarification. And I don't know who you're talking about having made any statements about what was going to happen or not, because the only person I know of who made such a statement was yourself.
No, I will be glad to share that with you at any time. And if you would like for me to share it right now, I will.
Well, go
It was Douglas Gregory that said it to Dover.
And what did I say?
Dover, would you step up to the microphone, please, and tell Mr. Gregory what he said?
What did I say?
Point of order.
Yes?
I think this is going outside the scope of the discussion with regard to this particular.
I didn't ask for.
I heard you ask.
No, I just.
You
wanted
heard
to
me,
clarify.
you asked me
you
who
said
said
you
that other than myself, which is implying to the audience that I was the one that made it up. Is that not what you were implying?
No, that is not what I said.
That's what you said.
No, I'll repeat what I said. Okay? The only person that I know of, I said that I know of, who has stated that this was going to happen was you. So All we're asking is that you follow the law.
I am asking to protect the citizens of this city.
No, that's not the issue here. The issue,
I think it is.
the issue is that when you decide to do that, you have to bring it before council for a vote. That's the issue, plain and simple.
We're in the middle of a project, Leslie. We are in the middle of a
But you
project, and the
can't-
former council has okayed it.
No, it hasn't. Where is the record of that?
Point of order again, please.
Yes?
If we can come back to the issue at hand, the fact that you've already pointed out is that there are previous orders by the council ordering some security items at the dais and some other things in the conference room. Those have been approved by the council, and there's no problem with those. The issue is the proposal without the participation of council to impose the use of metal detectors and other screening procedures at the entry to the council chambers when council is about to have a meeting or is in session. That hasn't been brought to the council, and the complaint, as I understand it, if there is one, is that this has been ordered by executive fiat without the participation of the council. Nothing prevents you from making a recommendation.
Sure.
And if the council will look at it and agree that something needs to be done, issue the order, that's no problem. But the fact is that the council is the governing body and has the authority to make that determination, whereas you as mayor, much as we revere you and appreciate your leadership, you don't have that authority, sir. That's the point.
Thank you, Mr.
That comes from the
McLean.
council.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick, for explaining how I'm revered. I appreciate that. Mr. Brennan, would this be the time for me to task council to protect the citizens of our city in the future? Since we're talking about this, he's called a point of order in order to clarify exactly what my duties are?
No, sir.
Okay.
Can I,
Of course.
what would be an appropriate time for the mayor to come forth with his proposal?
He has to bring it on the agenda.
Anytime he wants after this
Can he
meeting.
do it now?
No, it's not on the agenda.
It's not.
Next meeting, yeah.
It has to be on the agenda.
May I call the question so we can move on?
Yes, sir. So yes.
I move that we postpone this matter until our next city council meeting so it can be reviewed by council.
Okay, we have a call for the question on the table.
That's not a call for.
Other motions are not appropriate at this point.
Call for the question. All right. We will now move ahead with the vote. It'll be a roll call vote. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry, Bonnie. That was my fault. Okay.
I think it was a call.
Bonnie Hopke, 111 Emerson. I probably should have signed up for the non-agenda items, but since my first comments were on the agenda items, I am going to read my whole statement. As I review the actions of the new council this past month and the agenda tonight, I'm sad. I worry about the future of our city employees, and the residents.
Bonnie, I'm sorry. It's got to be on the agenda item when you're
I'm
speaking,
getting there.
please.
I'm getting there.
Okay, could we get there pretty quick?
Sure. Okay. Douglas, I used to respect and value your opinion and applaud your previous opposition to the very political ploys you are enacting
Bonnie, what does
now.
this have to do with the item, please? I cannot
All
allow.
right, Tim, did
Yes,
you
ma'am.
propose to build a bathroom specifically for your use?
What?
Does this have something to do with the item?
Yes, because
Okay.
it says that you cannot make any adjustments to the building without going to council. So I'm wondering, did you propose to add on a new restroom? I'm assuming the answer is no. So if not, I don't understand the reasoning behind this resolution. Is it to limit the mayor's ability to do the job for which he was duly elected? To this item, I say shame on you, Skip. You stood up here and cited chapter and verse as to how council could not limit the ability of another councilman to perform what you perceive to be his duties. And yet you put
on the
forth this resolution limiting the actions that the mayor can perform. I don't understand how it is okay for you to propose this action, but it was not okay to relieve Douglas from serving as committee chair of Streets and Drainage when he moved his block to the top of the list to be prepared. Perhaps you can explain that to me.
Let's reel it in a little bit on the item.
In addition, given today's world, I would consider the use of mobile metal detectors a security measure that preserves the assets of the city and ensures the safety of the citizens. Don't all of us that live in Castle Hills want to be safe? Isn't that why we have our own police department? The safety of the residents that visit City Hall and the employees that work here is the job of the mayor, and he or she should not have to go to council for approval prior to initiating any actions that protect us. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. That was a pretty broad, the item that you were trying to pass, Leslie, was very broad. It lists a number of items, okay, in the resolution itself, which was the 22, section 22. So when Bonnie was talking about that, every single item that she did referenced anything that had to do with what would have to come to council and would strip the powers of, would put the mayor in a situation where he would have to ask council. And that isn't how we've done it in the
But
past.
isn't that what the code requires?
No.
The question's been called.
Always, yes, sir, you call the question.
Call the question.
Here we go.
We have, if we have other speakers, we need to hear those.
Okay, thank you, Skip. On item 4.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Brother
else.
Dooling?
Are we still on it? Yeah, okay, well, that's all it says.
Brother William Dooling, 201 Gladiola Lane. And on this topic, I signed up to speak on it because the way it's written, I had not an earthly idea what it's about.
Neither did I.
And now that you've gone on, all of you, I still have. I'm not any more enlightened than I was when I walked into this room. And I think this is a problem of the way, not only this proposal, but others are. We, of course, sitting in the lowly benches, have no earthly idea what it is you're looking at. I assume there's a document there that has language, because it starts out by saying to consider and act upon an ordinance to clarify. And then it has this title. I guess it's a title. It's all in caps. I don't know where that comes from. I don't think it should be in caps. But the mayor's authority as manager of the city property limited to usage and preservation of assets and emergencies, and city council's authority and approval of physical modifications and security procedures. What in the world is that? And it's certainly not clear, and what's being proposed is not clear, albeit Mr. McCormick's attempts certainly go in that direction, saying, well, it's just a motion to bring things like this to council. Things like what? That big, long title? So, I mean, this is so badly, and I have to say, the television camera is running, let alone the stream. And, you know, if we can't get better language, I'm an old language teacher, better construction, follow Robert's Rules of Order, and before things are put up here for discussion, they should be thoroughly vetted by, I assume, the city attorney, but certainly somebody who knows how to write things in a clear manner. And I would ask, as I've asked many times, that somehow these items be available, even if it's 1 or 2 copies, for the public to actually read what it is you're considering. We have no earthly idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dooling. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, didn't we do that years ago? This was brought up years ago that Brother Dooling brought up. Years ago. And I thought we'd been doing that, having something out there on the table for people to read. I thought we'd been doing this all this time.
I believe, and I don't know, it's on the, now I do understand some people don't have computers. And I do understand that it is posted outside on a limited basis. But I would also like to, if someone doesn't, You calling a point of order?
No, actually, I have a suggestion. If we can pull up the agenda that's online on the computer, we can show it on the wall and everybody can see what we're looking at.
Fantastic, okay.
Good idea.
You're talking about the guts of the...
It's got the guts.
Oh, in
It has
there.
the guts. It's got the agenda and the proposed ordinances.
Hang on just a second.
It does not have the guts. It has a confusing title, all in caps, and it says we're going to clarify. And it doesn't, and there's no clarify how. What mechanism? Skip said, Mr. McCormick, Councilman McCormick said, through a process of coming to council, I don't see that on paper anywhere. This isn't an ordinance. An ordinance to clarify that doesn't do anything to clarify anything. That's all I'm saying. So if I thought you had a piece of paper that up there on your dais that actually has an ordinance with the whereases and wherefores and whatever you put into it. But if you don't, I have no earthly idea why you're even discussing.
Thank you, Brother Dooley. Mr. McCormick, you called a call for the question.
Yes, I did.
Thank you very much. The call for the question is on the table. We're going to do a vote now, a roll call. Mr. McCormick, how do you vote on this item?
What are we voting for, sir? You want to give us that statement again, please?
Minnie, would you please repeat the item, please? The item we're voting on? We have a call for the question, Douglas. I don't want to get accused of not following parliamentary procedure.
I want to make an amendment. Is it too late?
Consider and act upon ordinance number 2018-0612B, clarifying the mayor's authority as manager of city property limited to usage and preservation of assets in emergencies, and city council's authority for approval of physical modifications and security procedures.
Skip, did you want to remove your move there, or did you want to go ahead with the vote?
No, I think let's go ahead and vote.
Okay, good. Let's a roll call vote. Skip, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Scott? No, this is to actually...
Is this to remove the question?
This is to actually clarify the mayor's authority, and I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I'm sure there's something in the bowels of how we did. It's not there, Leslie, to what it is. So whatever it is they're trying to propose.
Because I do believe I objected to the consideration of the question, which requires a vote before we can vote on the motion. Are we voting on the motion, or are we voting on the objection to the consideration of the question? That's what I'm trying to clarify.
Jesus.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Brennan?
Does no one know the Roberts Rules of Order and Procedure? I'm sorry, but I called an objection to the consideration of the question.
I think the mayor agreed with the question, raising the question, which means that it's now up for a vote on the ordinance.
So what are we clarifying, Mr. Brennan?
We're clarifying that we're voting on the ordinance, sir. I'm sorry, I spoke.
Who
out of turn.
crafted this? Did you craft this, or did someone else?
I didn't craft this, Mayor.
You did not craft it?
No, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to answer, if you were asking that question, what Brother Dooling said. I can't really speak into the mic because it's tied down, so people will complain about that, but I can't move it.
Well, I don't think anybody did that on purpose, but we'll try to fix that.
Okay, thank you. All right. We did not craft the ordinance. The way that it's done with all of those caps is done by staff.
So you're telling us staff crafted this ordinance?
That's correct.
And you're bringing it forward? Okay, I just want to make sure.
We brought the original description, and staff created the ordinance.
Mr. Brennan, is there enough information in that to clarify exactly what we're clarifying, the duties of the mayor?
You know, I don't want to say there is or isn't.
I'm not
there.
sure
It's-
if I can have a mayor's picnic, or if I can have somebody have a wedding out here, or whether the other duties that have been prescribed by law in this city before, and we've practiced for the past 50 years.
Well, Mayor, the way I see it, you know, there's a separate resolution that says you're the person in control of the use of public facilities, city facilities.
It says.
And I think this ordinance recognizes that. The state law says that you can make recommendations for the use of the physical facilities. So in spite of section 1, it says you're your authority is limited to control of the uses and so forth, you're still going to have your state authority to make recommendations for
What does that mean? Does that mean I can't have a mayor's picnic, or, I want to clarify?
No,
Because the ordinance calls for clarification,
Point
Leslie.
of order.
You're the one that brought it forward, yes, sir?
Point of order. We've twice had a call for the question. We're off subject and into other areas. If we could go back to the issue on the call for the question, get the vote out of the way. This is taking way too much time. No offense.
You're exactly right, mister, but I hope that someone comes to the mayor and clarifies exactly what I can do sometime. Thank you. I would love to sit down with you.
Okay.
And I'd make the appointment right now if you want to. Mr. McCormick, how do you vote on this issue?
I vote aye.
Thank you. Ms. Scott?
If we're voting on the motion, I abstain because I believe it's violating state ordinance.
Thank you. Ms. McGlynn?
I abstain as well because I believe that it violates either state statute or local ordinance.
Thank you. Ms. Winger?
Aye.
Mr. Gregory? Aye. Okay, it passes 3 with 2 abstentions. Now, let's move on. Okay, we're moving on to item 4, consider upon an ordinance number 2018-0612C, amending the budget of prohibit funding or payment from the 2018 funds or authorizations to pay amounts not due or owing until 2019 and limit the 2019 and future budget plans to prohibit appropriation, allocation of application of funds from any City of Castle Hills account to fund the Encode software as a service agreement with Tyler Technologies dated May the 14th, 2018. City manager shall explore termination of the software as a service agreement with Tyler Technologies dated May the 14th, 2018, with the city manager, will make no further payments on this agreement without the approval of city council. Before we go forward, this ordinance forces the breach of a lawfully made contract to the city for which money has been paid. That would constitute mismanagement of public resources equivalent to incompetence by public officials, which includes gross ignorance of official duties, of gross carelessness in the discharge of official duties. The city auditor spoke at length about the risk of financial loss with the current computer software. Mr. Brennan, is this a legal doc?
If this is adopted, it's very bad judgment, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay.
Please expand on that, Mr. Brennan.
As the mayor said, Mr. Gregory, this ordinance forces a breach of a lawfully made contract for which money's been paid. I've heard that somebody may contend that the contract can be terminated for lack of appropriation, which is a charade to mask an actual termination at will, which is an act of bad faith. In my opinion, one of the definitions of incompetence in the code, the local government code, is gross ignorance of official duties or gross carelessness in the discharge of official duties. And when you intentionally choose or elect to breach an existing contract after you've already paid part of it, I think that constitutes incompetence.
In the existing contract, is there an opt-out provision?
There is, as long as you pay the penalties provided in the contract, unless you argue that you're doing it for lack of appropriation, which is a willful, like I said, charade to mask an actual termination at will.
And what are the penalties as stated?
Well, if that's what you try to do and it's determined by a court that you were participating in that charade of lack of appropriation, I would assume that if the company so chose, they could
No,
force you to complete the contract.
No, not like, no. No, you sent us a memo, I believe it was you who sent us a memo. I think it was you. Somebody sent us a memo saying the various things that can happen if we decide to cancel the previous city council's agreement. And the thing I wanted to know, and I was working off that, I want to know what would be the penalty to the city if we decided that the new council did not agree with the contract made at the last meeting of the old council. What would be the dollar penalties?
I don't know how many dollars it is, but there is an opt-out provision in the contract that requires you to pay a substantial sum of money for opting out improperly.
But we don't know what the substantial sum of money is?
As I remember, it is a lot.
It's a lot?
Yes, sir.
Question?
Thank you. So let's go ahead and get a motion on the table, and as far as I'm concerned, this was a very poor choice of judgment, but of course, I'm just the mayor, I don't have a vote. So do we have a motion for this to move forward? Not yet.
You know, this is very similar to John Adams when he appointed all the midnight judges 5 minutes before his term ended. I will move a motion that we table this until next month, because I want to know what the monetary penalties will be if we decide to stop this. And if they are not substantial versus how much we would be paying to this, it's an unknown amount of money. It ranges anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000. I want to know if the penalties are $3,000 or $5,000, well worth the penalty. But since I do not have that information, and I would like to get that information from whomever can provide it for us, I guess the city attorney?
You made the motion?
At least right now.
Hmm?
He is now.
Will be for the next 3 months, at least.
Question?
Okay, will you be the one to find out, Mr. Brennan, how much the monetary penalties would be if we choose to opt out of the contract?
I can help compute that. What the contract says is if you terminate during the first year of the initial term, which is what you're talking about doing, 100% of the fees through the date of termination are due, plus 25% of the fees then due for the remainder of the initial term, which I think was a 3-year contract, 3-year term. I'm sorry, the city manager says it was a five-year contract. So somebody could put the pencil to that and figure out what it would be, but it will be substantial.
Can we get into this with a motion and a second so we can actually discuss? And if Douglas would like to table it after that, we could go from there.
He's made a motion to table, Mayor, so I guess.
I heard a motion on the table. Is there a second to?
Second.
What?
Point of order.
Yes, go ahead.
Motion to table means it disappears forever. Was that your intent?
No. And if you table a motion, it is available for recall in any subsequent meeting. It isn't postponed to a specific date, but it does not disappear. It's still here.
Stays on the table, that's right.
It's on the table, and we can pull it up anytime the council chooses to.
So we have a motion to table by Mr. Gregory. Is there a second to move that forward? Thank you, Ms. Winger. Okay, there's a motion and second. All in favor?
Well, there's discussion.
Yeah, let's have a couple of questions.
I thought table killed the issue on the table right then. Yes.
There is no discussion on tabling an item. There is a recommendation, a second, and a vote.
Thank you. Would you read that? Okay. That's that. Would you like to pull your motion to table and go back into discussion?
Yes, let's go back into discussion for.
So you're pulling your motion to table?
Pulling the motion to the table.
Are you pulling your second, Leslie?
Okay.
I'd like a brief discussion
Thank you.
here. Let's get the.
Do you have a motion?
Money out. No, I move that we find out right now how much this exact penalty will be for the city.
Douglas, that isn't on the table. What's on the table right now is to move the motion forward and second it and get into discussion.
Okay, I'll move that we move it forward and talk
Thank-
about it.
Okay.
Thank you, Skip. Do we have a second for that? And Douglas seconded it. Okay, let's get into discussion. Douglas, go ahead.
I've had one person call me on this item, just one, and she was in favor of it, and she asked me to let you all know, Ginger McGavers. I think we need to know right now exactly what the penalty would be if we terminated if we,
May I clarify, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Brennan, earlier, when we talked about this the first time, you said that it might be canceled or terminated under an agreement of comity, right? And without penalty.
That's correct. That's possible.
Okay. And exploring termination might include that provision, might it not?
It might, if that's the motion,
Okay.
if that's the ordinance.
Have you looked at provision, section F 2.4 of the contract?
Yes, sir. The lack of
Okay.
appropriation.
Okay, what that says, and I'm going to quote it for the benefit of the council that doesn't have it before them. If you should not appropriate or otherwise make available funds sufficient to utilize the SAAS services, comma, you may unilaterally terminate this agreement upon 30 days written notice to us, period. You will not be entitled to a refund or offset of previously paid but unused SAAS fees. You agree not to use termination for lack of appropriations as a substitute for termination for convenience. And what that essentially means is we have at this point appropriated funds in the 2018 budget. We have not yet appropriated funds in the 2019 and subsequent year budgets. The first payment of $31,500, according to the agreement that Mr. Rapley negotiated with Tyler, will not be due and payable until after the 1st of January 2019. So it will not be part of the 2019 budget. What we have is an opportunity to explore termination without penalty by using comity or section 2.4 under the contract. And if it turns out that we can't negotiate a termination, we can address it again at another time. But the problems with the contracts so far are these. I've surveyed 15 or so local cities that use Encode, and without exception, each of those cities tells me that Encode does not solve the problems that it purports to solve here. The other issue is that even if we buy Encode, that doesn't solve our problem for this year budgeting, or does it solve our problem at the end of the year when we come up for a financial audit. So we need to take some quick looks at solving our immediate problem in addition to looking long-term. And as I say, I have looked at this with the idea in mind that if Encode is the best software, I want to spend the money to buy it if it's going to really solve our problems. What I have learned from other people using it is that it doesn't solve those problems. So that's why at this point I'm saying we should look at alternatives to get out of the contract and at the same time be exploring other options. So for that reason, I think we should go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Skip. Ms. Scott, did you have any comments on this?
Is that a
please?
motion?
Excuse me?
So you making a motion?
The motion is already on the table and seconded.
I think
We're
I've
into
already made a
discussion
motion.
now. I'm sorry?
I think I've already made a motion
Yes,
when we said let's talk about it and get on with it.
Yes, sir. Got it. Ms. Scott, did you have any comments on this, please?
I did. My biggest concern about canceling this and not going ahead and approving and purchasing the software is the fact that the audit that was presented to us stated in 3 different places that under the current software, there is the opportunity for funds to go missing that are completely undetectable. Think about that a minute. Your money as a citizen can disappear in an untraceable, undetectable manner in 3 different ways, as addressed by the city independent auditor. When we found that out, we asked Mr. Rapley, our city manager, you know, what do you suggest? We asked the auditors, what do you suggest? They said, move to this new software. It's compatible with what you have in the court system. It's compatible with what you have in the police department. It takes care of having to put in triplicate information because it's not compatible, which reduces human error. But the number one reason that I think it is very important to move forward with this software is to protect your money as citizens. And that is my job, to protect your funds. And the software we have now leaves the city vulnerable to malfeasance. So that is my main point on this and why I do not think we need to cancel this. We need to move forward, and we need to do what has been recommended by our auditors and by our city manager.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Ms. McLean, did you have any comments?
Yes, Mayor. I reiterate what Mrs. Scott said about the 3 opportunities for undetectable fraud that were identified by the audit, and that was a big concern to me. But I also find it curious that Mrs. Wanger and Mr. McCormick stood at that podium last fall when Mrs. Scott and I brought back the 2-to-1 matching for the retirement for our employees. And they stated, how dare we bring back something that council had already considered. The council had voted and had said no, even though we had new information and from the actuaries from TMRL who came down to actually speak to council to reconsider that item. So now they are bringing back, or at least Mr. McCormick and Mr. Gregory are bringing back an item that was considered by the prior council for reconsideration by this council. This computer program syncs with what we already have. It will save employee time. It will help us with budgeting. It will help us. We learned last year at TML trainings that cities have 5-year forecasting for their revenues and expenses, and we came back and said, we want that. And we were told we can't do that because our current programming only lets us do the current budget. So there was no way to look forward with revenues and expenses and forecast how much money we might have or how little money we might have to spend for the things our citizens want, like streets and drainage and parks and splash pads and all the other things we've discussed on Next Door. It's got tremendous budgeting tools that will allow our department heads and our city manager and council to know exactly where we are in the budget on revenue and expense items with drill down menus that will let us see things we can't see in our budgeting right now. And I will reiterate, reducing the chance for mistake, because right now we're going from assist. It goes to an Excel spreadsheet, and then it has to go into Encode so they can do budgeting. At the end of the year last year, when preliminary numbers were given out, they were over $300,000 off because of this horrible system we have in place that our interim finance director and our city manager have worked to try to fix. And they found the problems, they identified them, they brought them to the prior city council, and we voted on this software to help protect your money, the money that belongs to the citizens and should be used to do good things for this city.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Skip, yes, ma'am, you're next. Skip, I'll come back around when we come back around, so make sure that you get to say something. Thank you. Ms. Winger.
Yeah, I think as Mr. McCormick has already pointed out, and he did quite a bit of research on this, a lot of things are promised. They don't necessarily work out. Encode is not the only solution to the problems that we have. There was no due diligence done to explore other options that we would like to look at. And by the way, it is not the job of this auditor or any auditor to recommend software. That was totally inappropriate.
Thank you, Ms. Winger.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
No, let's get him, and then we'll come back around. Skip had already raised his hand once, then I'll come back to you, Ms. McLean. Thank you so much. Mr. Gregory.
Gregory.
The motion, just to go over this again, because it doesn't sound like the same motion when I'm hearing them talk about it. It is simply saying that we will not pay the money until it's due, until 2019, and it be authorized in the budget at that time in 2019, or not authorize it. And we're exploring terminating. We haven't terminated anything yet. So this is not elimination of Encode. My God, this is why I wanted to go over the budget, because we're paying Encode a gargantuan amount of money every year. And it grows and grows and grows. But this is simply to explore termination and limit the authorization of payments, not due until 2019. That's all it is.
Thank you, Douglas.
And one final thing. I did spend an hour and a half talking with various people who like Encode and the city director and other people who have it. It is a very good system, no doubt about it. But it's not the best that it has. We could spend an enormous amount of money and to only get the best, and you'd use the same argument, well, if you have to buy the best, so let's buy the $500,000 program. And if you don't approve for a $500,000 program, you don't like to know how money is spent in the city. That's not the point. We're a little town, 4,100 people. We need a program that is not a Jaguar, because Jaguar problems are not what we have right now. We have problems of an Impala. The things that we need to use are not the most expensive programs that you can get, but the most practical and programs you can get. And the problems that we had last year was not brought on by the program that we had. It was when our finance director, who was a fantastic finance director, out of frustration, had enough and left in mid-year. And the city manager at that time, it wasn't his bailiwick of expertise, there's no doubt about it. We fumbled and bumbled our way through till the end of the year. That is not, Encode could not have saved anything, Assist couldn't have saved anything. That was a problem of personnel at the time. We haven't had that problem before. It popped up last year, but there were a whole bunch of problems. Going back to this is not to get or terminate Encode. This is to explore termination and dealing with the payment of monies. That is what this motion is saying. I move the question if that is permissible.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what
Has
you
it
said.
already been
Did you move the question, sir?
Did you move the question?
No, I'm just asking what you just said. I couldn't hear you away from
I would
the
like to move the question. If that is
Basically cut you out of saying
He's
anything.
calling the question.
Have you not talked?
I have spoken, but I'm asking, are you calling the question? Is that what you're
Yes, sir.
saying?
Calling the question.
Calling the question.
Douglas, there's citizens to sign up to talk about this.
All right, that's fine. I withdraw my call of the motion if that is permissible. Mr. Brennan?
Of course.
I withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Douglas. Appreciate it. Skip, you were kind of motioned to me. Did you have something to say? Thank you, sir.
As somebody said, I've done a lot of research into this in the past month, and I've spoken to a number of city council, city managers, and I've had some other people checking for me. And universally, all the city managers that are using Encode have a problem with it. There is no such thing as a program in which you have to make no inputs. And the rule is garbage in, garbage out. So if your inputs are mistaken, your output's going to be wrong. And we have to put the same kind of information into Encode as we have to put into any other program. Now, TML lists on their site a list of municipal software, which does not, it happens, include Encode. So they don't recommend it for some reason or another. I haven't called them up and asked, but I think that's worth doing. We have, over the past number of years that we've been using whatever the current program is, Assist, I think it's called. We've had good results for a number of years when we had somebody here who was conversant with that software. Once that person left last year, we had no one who was conversant with that software, and I have looked into the training that was available for Assist and what training was sought, and nobody from our city has sought training or received training in Assist, which is the current software. And none of the people who are presently working with Assist have had any training in Assist in the past year or so that I've been able to find out about. So I think that may be part of our problem. Like I say, Assist may be a good program and it may be the one we want to use, but we need some time to make a decision about it, and that's what the purpose of this is, to give us an opportunity to explore termination, look at other software programs that may be substantially less expensive. I would point out that That Encode itself will cost us $100,000 over the first 5 years of the program. The cost of maintenance of the program every year is $13,600 or thereabouts, and the cost of assist is about $3,000. So Encode is about 4 times as expensive as what we're currently using. We have not grown as a city, as our auditors commented that we need to keep up with our growth. Well, folks, we've lost 1,000 residents in the past 10 years, so we're not growing. And so the idea that we need a bigger program because we're growing is just, that's fallacious. But.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick.
Mr. Mayor?
Appreciate it, yes.
I would like to clarify something that Mrs. Wenger stated. I did not state that the auditor recommended software. She expressly stated when she presented the audit that she was not allowed and would not recommend software. She suggested several different softwares that other cities use. And I believe prior council has done its due diligence on this, and it has nothing to do with growing. The size of the city has nothing to do with the determination to use this software. But I crunched a few numbers here, and we're complaining about the $43,228.21 of the annual maintenance fee for what we have with Encode right now. That's the annual fee, so let's just call it $43,000. In May alone, our court, which is already on Encode, brought in over $117,000. I think that's more than the $43,000. Our code compliance brought in over $20,000. They are currently on Encode. Our permits brought in over $24,000 in May, and they are in Encode already. And the health inspections, which I believe are also on Encode, brought in over $15,000. So my rough calculation is that we brought in, $160,000, $180,000 in May, which last time I checked, $180,000 is more than $43,000, and that's what the annual fees are for Encode right now. So we are certainly getting our money's worth out of this program that we have already, and I anticipate we would out of the program that council has already approved.
Can I speak?
Thank you, Ms. McGlynn. Ms. Winger, did you have something to say?
I do. I think that's a fallacious conclusion, Ms. McGlynn, because the software didn't bring in any money. People did that through their work.
Hang on. Okay, we have a couple of people signed up for this, so let's get started. First on the list, this is item 5, right?
Yep.
Oh, good, I guess I'm right. Bruce Smiley. Bruce, we will hold this to 3 minutes. There's limited people signed up for this, so I don't know if they're going to yield their time or not. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Bruce Smiley, Caliph, 247 Foxhall Lane. I'm going to cut out a whole paragraph, which I'm sure you'll appreciate me doing. But in the first paragraph, I have bolded human error and fraud. And that's something in my further comments, I wish you would keep those 2 words in mind. In the last city audit, it was pointedly noted that the assist accounting system currently being used by the city does not have the ability to interface with the court system building codes, as we've all discussed, and are most prolific generators of revenue. Therefore, spreadsheets, journals need to be transferred, recreated, and put into the new system. This increases the amount of work required to record the data for financial statements and increases the likelihood of error and fraud. Also, the new system will curb the need to expand staff, which I know is very important to all of us. Absolutely. The Encode system was purchased to adhere to the recommendations of the auditor's controls and to centralize the accounting and recording systems with accounting systems more conducive to our city and its corresponding revenue streams. Now, history, the Encode system has been an ongoing modernization of our city's business operations for a number of years through the tenure and review of various city managers, councils, and mayors. This is to help modernize and reduce the need to expand staff. Discontinuing this process, I truly believe, is a careless disregard of council's duties, demonstrates gross ignorance of council's duties regarding the financial reporting requirements of our city. The public appearance of financial malfeasance even being possible, but more importantly, concealed, or the possibility of being concealed, is not in the interest of our city and its citizens. I highly advise against voting to do away with this system at this time.
Thank you, Bruce. Audience, Ms. Scott has had an emergency situation with her family, and she's going to be leaving right now. Moretta, we hope the best for whatever's going on, and please let us know, if you can, what the situation is. Okay, let's go to the next person on the list, please. That's going to be Bonnie Hopke. Pass, okay. Mike Flynn. I think that's a 5.
It was actually a 6. I didn't sign up for this, but I do have some comments, but I can wait till later.
No, well, you want, Bonnie, are you going to relinquish your time to Mike? Thank you.
She's so gracious. She's so gracious and generous.
Boy, that'd be a rough night if you didn't, buddy.
Yeah. I've listened to all your arguments, and I applaud the desire to be fiscally responsible, but I think at the same time, you're ignoring sunk costs, okay? You've already expended money to buy this system. You're going to have fees and penalties if you cancel the contract. Plus, you're going to have to spend more money to go out and purchase a new system, and then you're going to have to train them. So those are costs that you haven't considered in your arguments, and I hope you'll do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Let's move on down the road to John Squire. Wait. Where? God dog it. Hey, John, Brother Dooling, I'm sorry. You're right. Come on up. My apologies, sir.
Well, it's just the Roman numerals are really hard to read when they're written, handwritten. Any rate, Brother William Dooling, 201 Gladiola Lane. And again, I thought Ms. Winger was going to say that it's right in front of me. I don't know what else to do. So. Well, we have lots of money. We should be able to get better mics. Any rate. Don't penalize my loss. I was interrupted. A side point when Ms. McClin made her calculation. I cautioned council, some of you know I was the municipal judge for 10 years. Saying that the municipal court brought in $100,000 is not money to the city of San Antonio. In fact, it's not even a city court. It's a state criminal court, and 98% of all of that money goes to the state of Texas. A very small proportion, only the fines, the fees, go to the city. So we ought not to use the municipal court as a cash cow when in truth it really isn't. My other point was, similar to the previous one, I really would I'd be willing to work with somebody on this. I'm an old teacher and I'm an old lawyer, but I do know a thing or two. And again, this is so badly written, it appears to have 3 points, but it is one sentence written in all capital letters, which so apparently this whole document is, but I don't know why. It's very hard to read. It looks like everything's announcing something. It should be written in lowercase when appropriate. And it should be broken into usable sentences. The part that I think everybody finds objectionable is the first part about prohibiting appropriation to pay a contract. As a lawyer, I certainly agree with Mr. Brennan. I think that is very, very foolish. And all this public, it's now on the airwaves and the records, and it will come back to bite you big time if anybody sues for breach of contract. That part should be stricken. The second part has to do with seeking, what's the word there? Seeking termination, to explore termination. Well, that, yes, if city manager were directed to explore termination through comedy or anything else, well, that would be fine. I don't think anybody would object to that, but you still have to pay in the meantime. But to say, one, we're not going to pay, and again, I'm not sure that that first line says that, but it's a double negative, and on last time I checked, I don't think two negatives make a positive. So I think you're saying do not pay what's not to do until 2019. I don't know what that means. I think it could be more artfully written. If it means to pay everything up to 2019, I don't think that's what it says. And then it says, don't appropriate anything for 2019. That's a blatant disregard for contract law and obligations, and I just think that's real serious. And then the third one is, no, that was the third one, to explore the termination. I think if this had been written in 3 sentences, you could easily strike the first one, explore termination, and go ahead and I just wanted to concur with Mr. Brennan that to say we are going to plan to prohibit appropriation is a charade. It's not because you don't have the money or you don't have the resources to appropriate it. You're saying we ain't going to do it. And I think a judge will slap you upside the head. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brother Dooling. Let's, there's one person left, and then we can come back around to council. John Squire. Douglas, I'll put you down as first, okay?
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Mayor. So just a couple of things I wanted to bring up. I keep on hearing about the city of Castle Hills has 4,000 people. We're a very small town. I think, you know, in this day and age, that's very, very simplistic, and y'all are a little more sophisticated than that, understanding the laws, the regulations that this city is under, that it wasn't under back in 1950. This is not Opeyville anymore. We need to understand that we work within a very difficult framework. Second of all, this city is basically a $7+ million company. I don't know too many companies of that size that use accounting systems that do not communicate. I don't know any that size that don't use accounting systems that communicate. You need transparency in this city. You don't have that today. It's painfully obvious when the auditor is slapping you all down saying you don't have it. We have an incredibly qualified, competent city manager. I ask you, has there been any communication? Have you asked him to go look at various accounting systems that would help this city? And so far, nobody's brought that up. Nobody's asked him his opinion. I mean, my God, this guy comes from much, much better cities than we are and knows a heck of a lot more. And so I think somebody should at least contact him and talk to him about this if you haven't. Skip, you made mention that you went ahead and cued the other cities, and then you said something to the effect of, they all have a problem. Okay, yes, everybody's going to have a problem with the accounting system. That's just, I've worked with SAP, I do QuickBooks, I've worked with different kind of accounting systems, and I have problems with all the accounting systems. Nothing's perfect. And so I think when you make that statement, you need to better qualify that statement saying they have a problem, i.e. explain specifically what that problem is, because that's a very loose statement to say, and you're much smarter than that, Skip. Have not mentioned any of the alternatives. Y'all need to if you're not going to go with Encode, you need to look at the alternatives. Accounting systems aren't cheap, especially ones that actually work. You have a very cheap system that doesn't work. You need to look at something better than that for this city. The efficiencies gained by that are huge. Personal experience, I went and tried to get information back when I was on council. It took almost over a month for me to get the data that I needed to go ahead and look at some of the invoicing for one vendor. It's a very simple request. If I would have pulled that up on QuickBooks, I could have it in my hands in 5 minutes. It took me almost a month to get that data out of the city. Now, I understand there's other things going on, but that should have been a very, very simple request to get this information, and it took way too long for me to get that information, and I was very, very frustrated. That's lack of transparency at the very least in this city, and we don't need to be backstepping.
John,
Sir.
this can go off in a minute, probably need to wrap it up, okay?
Okay. I think the amount that we have to pay, we're going to have to pay for whatever reliable accounting system we get in the city. I think it's a very small amount to pay for the efficiencies and, of course, the transparency transparency that's gained. So, again, if you have come up with systems that are much less expensive than Encode, and I'm not saying I'm familiar with Encode. If there's others that are out there that are much better than Encode, bring them forward. I haven't heard anything. You know, the audience hasn't heard anything, and so, again, thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, there's somebody that's signed up here, and I don't know if it looks like a 5 or not, but anyway, Sherry Johnson. Okay, all right. Guess Sherry isn't here. Okay, council, would anybody like to, Skip, did you want to say any more around that thing here?
I will address the issues that were raised about what problems there were with Encode. In talking to various city managers, it appears to me that the universal problem appears to be that the interface between various modules does not work as well as advertised. So the benefit that's sought to be had from having one system across the board doesn't really seem to materialize in practice from those who are really using it. That's the whole purpose that was offered for buying Encode in the first place, was the interface. And that interface apparently does not work as well as advertised or as well as described, or at least hoped for by Mr. Rapley and Ms. Fagans. Part of the problem with getting information out of our current system is that the people who are using the system currently are not trained on it. There's been no training for anybody in our finance department on our current system, Assist, and you can't expect these folks to be able to make it work well if they haven't had that training. Now, I understand that there has been a hope that we'd come up with a better system. I'm not sure that Encode is that system. I would like to explore other systems and see whatever is out there that is best for our community, that will give us a decent compromise between perfection and cost. And we're not going to get perfection, and we can pay anything we want to pay for a system. It may not work any better, but we can pay any amount for it. And I don't think we ought to pay any more than we really have to. That's my point, and I think that's where we are.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Douglas, you wanted to add?
I've listened to what everybody had to say, and I think there was some good input. I'm still long from being convinced that Encode is what we need. However, is this the time to come up and discuss amending this motion? I'd like.
Sure.
This is where I think the motion should now read, and this is due in part to what I've heard some people say out there. Consider and act upon ordinance number 2018-06-12C, amending the 2018 budget to withhold funding or payment from 2018 funds or authorizations to pay amounts not due and owing until 2019, period. Leaving out the rest of that line, the next line, the next line, and the next line, and then you continue. The city manager shall explore I'm eliminating, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 6th line down. We'll start. The city manager shall explore termination of the software as a service agreement with Tyler Technologies dated May 14, 2018, period. Taking out and city manager will make no further payments on this agreement, since it's my understanding we've made all the payments that are required of us already for this year of 2018.
Actually, if I may, there's a $3,500 payment due in August.
Well, I think this would probably come back to us by that time to determine what to do. So I would still remove, and the city manager will make no further payments on this agreement without the approval of the city council. I would hope the city manager would not rush to write the check until it is due in August. I think this tightens it up. It looks what Mr. Brother Dooling was talking about, what the other people were talking about. I apologize for the rudimentary way it was written. I take full responsibility for it. That's how I would amend it. Those are my minutes. If you'd like for me to read it again.
Sure, we can get into discussion.
Consider and act upon ordinance.
Are you withdrawing the other motion, or are we adding an amendment?
I'm amending the motion to take out certain lines.
Okay, go ahead.
And I'm reading it as it now would be. Consider and act upon ordinance number 2018-06-12C, amending the 2018 budget to withhold funding or payment from 2018 funds or authorizations to pay amounts not due and owing until 2019, period. The city manager shall explore termination of the software as a service agreement with Tyler Technologies, dated May 14, 2018, period.
To accept the motion as amended and vote on it.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second to that amendment. All in favor of that amendment?
Mr. Mayor, may we have a discussion on it?
Yes, go ahead.
The motion has only been to change the caption of the ordinance, which does not change the problems that Brother Dooling brought up. This is an extremely poorly worded ordinance that has whereases and sections that have not been addressed by Mr. Gregory's motion. So it still leaves us open to the holes and the legal arguments that both our city attorney and members of the audience have brought up to council about potentially violating the contract and providing fodder for lawsuits against the city.
Thank you,
Call the
Ms.
question.
Okay. The question is
May
called.
May I ask a question of our city attorney?
She's called the question. Do you withdraw that, Ms.?
No.
No. Okay, so that forces a vote. Okay, with that said, all in favor of the amendment? Okay, let's move on to the original motion, please.
I'm opposed.
You're opposed, right. So that's 3 to 1.
Well, this supplants the original motion.
The original motion?
Yes,
And I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
This supplants the original motion. The original motion is now gone. We've gone with the
No,
amendment.
you did an amendment to the motion, just by pulling items out is what I heard.
Yes,
That's what I heard. The original motion is still there. That was an amendment to the motion because I asked Douglas if he wanted to pull his motion and he said no, it was an amendment to the motion.
Okay, do you want to pull the original motion now?
Can't do it now. You've already amended. You'll have to kill both of them.
Yeah, Mayor, the amended motion took care of the whole topic and the whole subject. You don't need to do anything further.
Right.
Okay, all right, so it's over. Is that correct, Mr. Brennan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's go on to item 6, please. Okay, item 6. Yes?
This is a very important motion.
Point of order, there's nothing on the table.
Nothing on the table, Douglas. Okay, number 6, this ordinance fails to follow the state law regarding municipal officers. Section 22.071 of the local government code mandates that a city appoint a municipal attorney as the city officer. Section 22.077 authorizes removal of that city officer for incompetence, corruption, misconduct, or malfeasance in office after providing the officer with notice of grounds for removal and an opportunity to be heard. Another ground for removal is lack of confidence, which requires a 2/3 vote. The agenda item ordinance both fail to state the grounds for removal, which therefore invalidates this action. Therefore, both the agenda item and the ordinance terminate the services of Ryan Henry as alternate attorney, although there is no such position in the city, and Ryan Henry has not been appointed to the non-existent position. Want to move forward, Douglas?
I would like one, I would like a citation of what you have, and we have an agreement with Mr. Brennan, but all that being aside, here's his agreement for legal services. But, and so, you know, my problem I have right now is I have had in the past, I'm sorry, I've had problems with this in the past, and councils didn't pay any attention to me, and they barreled ahead. This is an important issue. I think it requires the full council to be here. Now, Mrs. Scott has had an emergency. I would like to table this until, put this at the end of this agenda. If Mrs. Scott is not back at this agenda, we will look at it at that time, whether to delay it until the next month. But I think it would require, this is an important thing, and this requires the whole council to vote. And with that's, I would request the mayor move this item to the last item on the agenda. And if Mrs. Scott has not returned at that time, we will discuss what to do at that time.
So granted.
I think it requires.
So granted. I just had an emergency too. Hang on.
Okay.
Somebody tell me what just happened.
Moving this to the end of the agenda, if Mrs. Scott is not back, and we will
Okay.
discuss it at
What's he
Well,
doing?
I'm taking over at the moment.
He has an emergency he's got to go to. A very pressing emergency.
Can't be that pressing, the door's open.
We have a mayor pro tem.
I have taken over, thank you, Tim. Did you want to go ahead, Mr. McCormick?
Okay, what are we doing? I understand that this particular item has been moved to the last place on the agenda.
Yes, I asked the mayor
I
before he
heard
left.
I understood that he granted that
Yes.
request, right? So we're moving on, and it's up to
Yes.
you
Okay,
now
so-
where we go.
So we're moving on to the next item. Item number 7. Consider and act upon ordinance number 2018-0612E, freezing full-time, part-time, and contract hiring and position changes in all city departments except police and fire until October 15th, 2018, unless sooner resolved by council.
Mr. Brennan, what do we do now? Is Ms. Winger still in charge?
Now that you're back,
Mayor
Mayor,
has
you're in
returned.
charge.
Excuse me?
Now that you're back, you're in charge.
Thank you. Okay, where are we at, Ms. Winger?
I just announced the mayor has returned.
I'm sorry.
I announced that the mayor has returned.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm back.
We're at item 7. Mayor.
Okay, here we, thank you. Okay, so here we go. We are going to, Douglas is actually, the last I heard was going to postpone this item until we have a full council.
That's already been done, Mayor.
Oh,
We're on
okay.
number 7 now.
All right, here we go. Thank you, everyone, for for whatever it is. Okay, item 7 is considered and act upon ordinance number 2018-0612E, freezing full-time, part-time contract hiring and position changes in the city department except police and fire until October 15th, 2018, unless sooner resolved by council. Do I have a motion, please?
I so
We
move the
accept
motion.
the proposed ordinance as stated.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, so Mr. McCormick and then Gregory, okay? All right, with that said, let's go into, Mr. McCormick, did you want to start this?
I think this will give us an opportunity to get our hiring procedures sorted out. I don't think it'll have any serious impact because police and fire department are excluded from it. In the event of some other emergency, the council can always have an emergency session and take action about it, but I doubt that's going to come to pass. The thing is that it appears that there are a number of temps and part-time and contract personnel that we have on board, and we're not quite sure who they all are at the moment. We'd like to have an opportunity to take a look at the manpower and requirements to see if we need to make any adjustments up or down, and to find out a little bit more about what's going on with our temps, part-time, and contract people. So until we find that out and get sorted out, I think it's appropriate to have a hiring freeze so that we can deal with it.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Ms. McLean?
So by we, the city manager is in charge of running the city. He is who city council has hired to deal with employment issues. So this we, who are we talking to about we? Because the city manager, this is his job. As far as I know, after our last audit, we are in great financial shape. There is nothing that indicates to me that we have any sort of financial reason to need to have a hiring freeze in the city. It appears that there is specifically a reason why council would want to do this, whether it's an attempt to hamstring the city manager's position, but this is an attempt by city council to micromanage what we have hired a professional to do for the city. So I'm opposed to it.
Thank you, Ms. McCormick. Ms. McLean. Ms. Winger.
I don't know, I heard the audit, and it didn't sound to me like we were in great financial shape. Calling a hiring freeze is something that council has done before. It is not micromanaging at all. I think, as Ms. Scott pointed out, it's our responsibility to look after people's finances. There's a great deal of concern about how many people we have and exactly what they're doing, and it's totally within the council's purview to do this. It in no way interferes with the city manager running the city.
Thank you, Ms. Winger. Mr. Gregory.
This is obvious, something that has to be done to determine whether or not we have adequate number of people working for the city and doing what they're doing. This is not micromanaging. The city council has done this before. This is simply looking at, we've had people in the industry of being city managers. I have talked to them, and they're surprised at the level of number of people we have employed by the city, considering the city's size. I want to find out, if I can possibly find out, whether we need all these people. And if we do, we do. But I don't see anything wrong with a hiring freeze for the time being. The hiring freeze would only last until October 16th, unless the city council sooner resolves the question. I think it is an obvious thing to do, especially with new council members here. I think they want to know more also. So my motion is as stated.
The problem, I guess the only problem I have is the timing. We need a financial officer, and surely this wouldn't be a politically motivated item on the agenda by any means, I don't believe. I respect Mr. McCormick's, making sure that we're okay and everything. I mean, and obviously, but we've had a young lady who has come in, and this would affect her greatly. She's sitting she's sitting right down there, and she's been acting as our financial director. She's basically straightened out a number of years of things that we've had a problem with. And I think that, you know, that hamstrings, and I would like to see an amendment to the thing, is hiring freeze in general, to allow him to look at a finance officer between now and October.
That's addressed by item 9, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry?
It's addressed by item 9. Item 9 on the agenda addresses your question
Oh,
precisely
okay.
on point.
Oh, okay.
And you're right. We need to go ahead and make a decision about a finance officer, and item 9 describes procedures for going about that, but.
Thank you,
Right
as
now-
long as, good. Thank you, Skip. We haven't got that far yet. So with that said, it looks like everybody has spoke. Leslie, did you have anything more to say? Okay, so let's, we have a motion, we have a second on the table. All in favor of this? Sorry. Thanks, Bonnie. Bonnie, why don't you come on up? My apologies again, Bonnie. You know, I got more papers up here than everything.
No, I have no problem standing up and telling you you missed my opportunity to speak.
Me too. I got to get some glasses. So if anybody is an optometrist in the audience, I'd love to see them afterwards. I really would. Thank you again. Go ahead.
Okay, I've got a couple things on this. One is there is nothing in the ordinance that says what the council is resolving. So I'm sure Brother Dooling is going to get up and say the same thing. All it says is this is being put on hold until resolution. Resolution of what? So that's my first thing. My second thing is that the council passed a budget earlier this year, and in that budget, new hires were approved. I don't know how many positions are affected or which departments are affected by this resolution, and I think that everybody in this room deserves to know who's and how many are being put on hold. This appears to be a totally political move to stop those hires just because the new and re-elected members of council didn't like the approved budget. Is it your intent to further slow city services because they don't have all the people they need for effective operations? Or are you signaling how the 2019 budget process will proceed even before the new budget is presented to the public and open for public hearing? I don't think that that's legal and certainly is not appropriate, open, and honest governing of our city. I see a new council that instead of helping the city manager, hinders his ability to do the job for which he was hired and meddle in business that should not be of your concern. I see new council members that seek to slow down city processes, waste the time of city employees, and ensure little gets accomplished. For people that are so worried about our city's budget and fiscal conservancy, you seem to have no problem putting forth ordinances and putting processes and procedures in place that waste the taxes we all pay. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Moving on to the next, Mike Flynn. Okay. Okay, let's go on down the list here to Brother Dooling.
Brother William Dooling, 201 Gladiola Lane. Yes, I echo what Bonnie said, 100%, but let me explain. Again, this is not clearly written. I don't know who wrote it. I don't know, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but exactly what Bonnie said. The last part should be at the beginning. Something, you need a subject, like every sentence has to have a subject. We don't even know what we're talking about here. a analysis of hiring and blah, blah, and, you know, whatever, analysis of something, manpower needs and requirements and so on, should be conducted on or before October 15th. And then, if you want to facilitate it, you know, to have the hiring freeze if necessary. I do think, I don't know if it's micromanaging or not, I do have a tendency to think sometimes that the council, much like San Antonio, and if you want to be like them, well then, go for it. But there's way too much management. You're here to create policy, not tell the city manager how to run his business. He is the business manager. And I think if he asks for a hiring freeze because of some problem he perceives, well, then that would be fine. But to tell him he can't do his job, I don't know why anybody ever works for us. I really don't. And I just think this is a serious question and ought not to be just glibly slid over. But again, nobody sitting on the benches has any idea what this ordinance purports to do. Again, Mr. McCormick elucidated what he thought was supposed to be done, but that ain't what's written here. So, you know, boys and girls, if we can't do a better job of this, I just think this is... And again, I'll offer my services to help people write things in a clear and concise manner. But I do think you're overstepping your bounds again. And if you need a hiring freeze, this man decides. If you need to direct him to do a study of manpower needs, that's what you do, but he doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dooley. Mr. Brennan, I have to ask a question. Were you involved in writing any of these?
No, sir.
Well, it sounds like that whoever brought it forward wrote it. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Okay. I was just curious. That's the third time I've heard that. Thank you.
Mayor, can I make a comment? Mayor? Sorry.
Yes.
I just want to let you know that, again, I think all of council got it on May 18th, that I provided a list and breakdown of all current employees by part-time, full-time, temporary, and any vacancies right now of what the current manpower is for the city. I also provided information on our health plan and related monetary salary information on each employee as well. So again, if there's questions, we can cover those with council as well.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Mr. McCormick, do you have anything to add to anything?
Sure, I guess not. I think it's all been said.
Okay.
No.
No, we have not voted, Leslie. We have not voted.
Do we have more people to be heard on this, Mr. Mayor?
No, sir. Are you calling for the vote? Let's call for the vote.
I guess I'll call for a vote.
Call for the vote. Okay. All in favor? Thank you. All opposed? Thank you. 3-1 for the hiring freeze. Time's up. Okay, we're moving on to item 8. Consider and act upon ordinance number 2018-0612F to require passport staff to prepare and present a business plan for council review at the first council meeting, July 2018. In addition, passport staff will prepare a sunset review, report a passport operation by the city council during the first city council meeting, December 2018. McCormick and Gregory, do we have a motion to get this on the table?
So move the motion.
Mr. McCormick, second?
Second.
Thank you.
Question, I think, following up with what Julian was saying, I believe that in the 4th line, sunset review report of the passport office operation, shouldn't it be to the city council?
One, two,
Yes.
three,
Yes,
four,
okay, so
two.
we're gonna
That's a
change.
typographical error.
Okay, so we're gonna change the word by to to. Okay, that's
Okay,
it.
that's a
That's my whole question.
typographical error. So written. Minnie, did you get that?
On section, the number 8, 1, 2, 3, the fifth line, which begins with sunset review report of the passport operation to the city council instead of by the city council.
That's a typographical error, one word. Okay, to the city council, so noted. Okay, all right. We have a motion and we have a second on the table. Discussion, Douglas? Start on your side, please.
The question of having a passport office, to me, initially made sense. Then upon looking at it further, I didn't think it made a lot of sense. But there was a question in my mind of, I heard numbers bandied around that it was going to bring in $500,000 a year and this, that, and the other. And I just don't know. So rather than eliminating it, I think we ought to look at it as a business point of view and have the people who will have this particular passport office come up with a business plan, present it to the council, how much they expect to spend, who they expect to hire. Because as of right now, we haven't a clue what this is going to cost us. But I would simply like to have this brought back in July to say, this is what we're going to spend, this is what who we're going to hire, and then at the end of the year, that's 6 months out, if it can show that it's making money above and beyond what's being spent, I think that might answer the question of whether it's a worthwhile endeavor. I hope it's a smash hit and brings in umpteen $1 million. I really do. But if it's just something that was an idea that just didn't pan out, it just didn't pan out. I remind the mayor that I brought something like this to the council about 10 or 15 years ago with regard to the STEP program. The chief at that time said it was going to make a lot of money or it would bring in a lot of revenue. And it sounded good to me, but I was skeptical, and we had a limitation on that. I just want to know how much we're going to be putting into it. That's why I want a business plan, and to have a firm time and date to determine whether or not we should continue. That's the reasoning behind it. We've talked about this political business being passed around all the time. I'm getting a little sick and tired of hearing it. Everything is political if you want to look at it, but this is practicality. If this works well like the STEP program did, fine. Let's do it and enlarge it and let it grow. But if it doesn't have the merit that people think it does, then let's let it die.
Ms. Winger?
Aside from what Mr. Gregory stated, business plan also needs to have a projection of profit and why that is expected. It has to be a marketing study, and I don't think we've seen that.
Thank you, Ms. Winger. Ms. McLean?
So Douglas, no one said that we would make over $500,000. San Antonio, with their 2 passport offices, last year grossed over $500,000. They expect to make over $600,000 with their 2 passport offices this year, and that was not taking into consideration the new rate that the U.S. State Department has authorized of $35 per passport instead of $25 per passport. I find it interesting that you are asking our staff to come back in July with a business plan to sunset in December, and you just voted a hiring freeze. So if, for some reason, this becomes wildly successful and our city manager needs to hire the $35,000 clerk that we've authorized in this year's budget, we can't do that without coming back to council to undo the hiring freeze. So there's a hamstring right there. You've given 5 months for a sunset, which I'm sure the STEP program had much more than 5 months for a sunset. We've already authorized the costs of the equipment needed for the passport office, which were estimated by staff to be under $1,000. It's a camera, a printer, some photo paper, and the backdrop, which we already have. It took 10 minutes from start to finish. I've got 3 children. When you have children, every 5 years, both parents have to go in person to apply for a passport. This year, my wait was only an hour and a half. Last year, it was 2.5 hours when I came up with the idea to bring this to our city for a potential income stream. I timed it. We had all of our paperwork in line. We did take advantage of the picture-taking opportunity, which was additional income. From start to finish, with the passport clerk we had in San Antonio, it was 10 minutes. So even if we used our part-time, the staff that has signed up to help us with this, and they processed 4 passports an hour for just the 20 hours we have committed to, for 50 weeks, that makes over $140,000, and that doesn't take into consideration what we might make for photos. So I do hope this becomes wildly successful, but I think that it's unrealistic to think that in a 5-month period you will have a realistic idea of what you're going to make in the long term. San Antonio had this, they adopted this program, I believe, in 2010 or 2011. Mr. Rapley, I don't know, I don't have my notes in front of me, if you remember. They have authorized the hiring of a new clerk in this year. The State Department estimates that over 1 million+ passports will need to be issued in the next couple of years, and there are a lot of reasons why you have to go in person to apply for a passport. I think that the ordinance that's being proposed is unreasonable in the sunset provisions. I understand why you would want a business plan, but the December for a sunset provision is absolutely ridiculous. I think it should be at least a year.
Thank you, Ms. McGlynn. Mr. McCormick?
I appreciate Ms. McLean's comments. When you say that the city of San Antonio is grossing $500,000 this year and expects to make $600,000 next year, that is the gross figure and doesn't consider their operating expenses, right?
Mr. McCormick, those are the numbers listed in their budget.
Simple question, Ms. McLean.
I assume that it's what was listed as income for that item on there. I don't know if they're grossing out the employees' salaries or what they're doing, but the income listed on their budget for this year was over $500,000, and I do believe that you've been given the paperwork that I gave to Nora so that you have that specific information from the San Antonio budget.
No, actually I don't, but I'd be happy to look at it. I would say that I think that they have done a great job of laying out the operating schedule for the business. My concern about the business plan is that it's much harder than most people believe or expect to get clients. And so the marketing and advertising part of the plan is the one that I'm most interested in. Now, you say that December is not a fair date, you want a year, is that right?
Well, I think giving 12 months is a more appropriate time than you have a full season of travel that you're dealing with.
Isn't that the same as a year? 12 months is a year, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I really don't have a problem with an amendment changing the sunset date to a year, if that's appropriate. Do I make that, or does somebody else make it?
You present it as an amendment, sir.
Can I amend the motion? Or
Yes,
can
sir.
whatever
You
it
sure
is that
can.
we've
Make the motion, and we'll run it forward.
Okay, then I amend it to say that we provide a sunset provision in June of 2019. That sunset, the sunset report will be due in June of 2019.
Thank you, Mr. The amendment is on the table, and a motion has been given by Mr. McCormick. Is there a second?
Second.
Douglas seconds it. All in favor of the amendment? 3. Leslie? Against? Or 4? 4? You're not for. She's against. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. McCormick, for that amendment. Okay, let's go back to the original. And I'm assuming there is somebody signed up. Let's take a look.